Hello, everyone. I'm Adrian Sanabria, host of the Enterprise Security Weekly podcast and principal researcher at the Defenders Initiative. Welcome to this webcast sponsored by Palo Alto Networks. I'm joined today by Greg Smith, the Senior Product Marketing Manager for Palo Alto's Cortex XSIAM product. How you doing, Greg?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. Looking forward to today's chat. This is definitely a topic that I think is top of mind for a lot of folks last year and this year, carrying over. And that topic is mastering AI in security operations. A lot of exciting stuff going on in that field, and you can expect to learn actionable guidance on integrating AI to improve your security posture, methods for reducing threat response times and boosting intelligence with AI, and how to enable effective collaboration between AI tools and human analysts. If you have a question during this webcast, I would direct you towards the blue circles you'll see at the bottom of your screen. One of those is just a general chat. First one on the left there, and I'll be checking that from time to time for questions or any discussion going on down there. You can chat with other attendees if you want. Then there's a dedicated Q&A button down there in the middle. And then finally, we've got a handouts button there. We've got some links and handouts, and you can grab those at any time. You can grab them now. You can wait till the end. I'll remind you again towards the end so you don't forget, though. All right, with that, let's get into it, Greg. Yeah, so I think starting out here, AI has become a loaded term, and I think it might benefit us to be a little bit more specific about what kind of AI we're talking about, because that word has a lot sitting on it.
Sure, sure. So the way I think about it a lot, talking to customers, going to executive briefing centers, talking to prospects, events, what we typically think about here is the classic scenario where you want technology in some way to make people and their work better. And when it comes to AI, sure, that became bucketized, and I think shoe companies now are trying to say that their sneakers have AI. Like everybody's trying to capture some kind of momentum here with mind share. But the point comes down to, in my view, there's things like generative AI, what we know from LLMs. A couple have become incredibly famous and almost ubiquitous with the phrase AI. And I think there are various security companies that have integrated that into some type of workflow, whether it's you can ask simple questions or you can get simple responses. And then there's the part that's, to me, what we've talked about for many years in security operations and various security products is the machine learning to help us identify attacks faster, help us not just correlate, but identify causality. And to me, those are two very different things, but very key to helping the practitioners, helping the organization. And so what I'll talk about today mostly is less about the generative part, not that that's absent, but more about kind of how we bring the ML portion to actually help us do our jobs better.
Yeah, yeah. And it's it's interesting seeing it, kind of stack up, right? Like the different types of AI, as we learn like what it's good for, what it's not good for. I always raise an eyebrow a bit, when I see an early stage startup saying they're, implying they're doing everything with it. Because I think we know, none of it can do everything well, and uh, there's still got to be a human element in there somewhere, right?
Agreed. And whether I'm at this company, talking about through Palo Alto Networks with you or previous companies I was at, I still come back to that same tenet of technology is supposed to help the people do the things. And I don't think completely removing the person, the expertise, the knowledge, is ever the true utopia, right? I'm sure there's some folks that view it as, hey, I can, decrease spend in some way, or have somebody who never sleeps and needs vacation. Sure, but the people, understanding people and how they behave, especially in security, is incredibly important. So that's to me, that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah. And it's the little things, right? Like when you're going through these workflows, particularly the kinds of workflows you might have in something like XIM. Like I remember when I was on the enterprise side, sometimes the smallest things would just bring me joy. Like I remember like just doing a DNS lookup for me, so I didn't have to open up a command line and do that. Like already having some of those
Yeah,
things there for me, gathering some of that contextual data and information. Almost kind of predicting what I'm going to need, though it's not really prediction. Like a lot of these workflows, like we know what they're going to need, we know what it's going to look like, and if AI can help put it there, then yeah, it makes sense. So, is like the AI you're talking about, like some of the ML stuff, I'm sure is behind the scenes, is doing its magic behind the scenes. But is any of this user facing? Do any of these, do Palo Alto customers need to get into prompt engineering and understand how to construct a prompt?
fair, fair. And I think there's also a distinction there with like some folks see the overlap of, let's say, the LLM components, the generative AI components, uh, and queries. And the reason I say that is that I was talking to a customer recently, and frankly, they were like, look, I don't want to have to learn more query languages. I've
Yeah,
learned a lot, and folks have made me forget a lot.
yeah.
What I'd like you to do
My
is give me
cubicle
the
is
chance.
papered with cheat sheets.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What I'd like you to do is give me the chance to essentially just ask, and you do the query for me.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I think about it as, things like we have with our Copilot, where you're able to ask, let's say something very simple. You just started your shift as an analyst. You say, wait, of the incidents that are assigned to me today, I need to sort through. What's the riskiest one? And now we have various ways we approach this and various levels that AI comes into play, like things like smart scoring. But if the workflow that this particular analyst wants is to be more, hey, engaged with a chat bot, if you will, a co-pilot there, you could ask, hey, what's the riskiest one? And then to your point earlier, be offered, show me, you know, these three hosts that need some level of intervention. And maybe it's those playbooks that have now been brought up that say, hey, look, we recommend you solve these this way. Um, let's jump in now and do it this way, or let's have you escalate to this particular team or whatever your team's workflow is. But the point being is getting you there quicker, getting there, solving the workflow problem faster. And then there's the part that's much, I shouldn't say hidden. Um, it's part of what you'd expect from a technology company providing you a service like this, a product
Mhm.
and solution set like this, where our knowledge of threat actors, say, from the hundreds of threat researchers on the product team, plus the hundreds of threat researchers on our Unit 42
Mhm.
side, plus the incident responders that they have and what they learn. And we've heard this for years. We got a service arm in this particular product company, and we're going to build it back into the product. But what I'm
Yeah.
talking about is not just talking about a feedback loop, but also having the data scientists on staff to then implement this in these types of forms, like detections, ML models, to be more accurate, more predictive, and also adjust as these techniques, and procedures move. And you talk to some CISOs today, and it's like, hey, I'd love to build that, right? I'd love to be able to have
Yeah.
that.
Exactly.
But data science teams, threat research teams, it's incredibly hard to scale in an organization that's not focused on that. And so to me, that's what's exciting about a company like Palo Alto Networks is, bringing that to the actual customer in a more seamless way. And yeah, we use the AI phrasing of like, hey, look, I just gave you all these different detections, all these different models, and I've operationalized for you. And yeah, it sounds like a marketing nerd, but it fundamentally makes your job faster, easier, less stressful.
And I think that's where a lot of this, the market in general needs to go, right? Like back in the times when I've set up SIMs and SOCs and things like that, A lot of it was DIY because it had to be.
Mhm.
I remember rolling out SIMs, and not a single one of the canned reports that the things shipped with was useful to me. So I would just have to start from scratch. And when Nearzook announced XDR, and what kind of the goal of that was, I love the idea of, look, a lot of these attacks look the same. They're coming from the same groups. We know how the attacks work. Why don't we do some of the detection engineering for you? Like, you can still do your own detection engineering, but every company shouldn't have to duplicate that development work themselves, right? When it's the same attackers, it's the same techniques every time. MITRE ATT&CK, that framework is huge. There's a lot of different techniques in it, but once you throw a heat map on it with what's actually happening in wild, that shrinks way down. It's not a, every breach that we hear the details of, there's a phishing component, there's a vulnerability that gets exploited, there, uh, Mimikatz dumps some creds, they pivot, they use the stolen credential. Like, it's the same story, right? So it
Fair,
makes
fair.
sense. You have those teams, yeah, why shouldn't that feedback loop benefit the customer?
Yeah. And the other thing I think about is, look, I've been lately calling it the a la carte model. If you want to go out, do your research on all the various MQs, waves, radars, peer review sites, and find the best SIM. Pick that one that works best for you. Then, now you're going to go out and try to find an EDR solution that you can connect to it properly, do your analytics from there.
Mm-hmm.
And then, well, let's be honest, you're going to need some other level of sensor and enforcement points across the ecosystem. So now you're looking at, how do you integrate
Cloud.
firewalling? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and to your point, cloud, like, what a beast that can be. Are we getting things from the CSP? Are we actually trying to secure our access to the CSP? Like, and I made it sound not very nuanced, but it's incredibly nuanced in those both layers. But the a la carte method, now you had to build all that. Then you
Yeah.
asked your detection engineering team to understand the signals from all of that. Spend more time parsing so it can ingest into the SIM, spit it back out to analytics. If that's your jam, I'm not saying, like, don't do it. If that's, man, that's like what really excites you about Monday, all good. But wouldn't another approach where you don't have to necessarily do all of that be nice? And that, to me, is what I talk
Yeah.
about the most with transformational thinking of how we architect a SOC. If you're great at detection engineering, you love to get into those weeds. How about it's not on you to build the entire foundation? And how about it's not on you to always stay 24/7 up to date on the latest and greatest? What if you can
Yeah.
offload some of that? Maybe, let's just arbitrarily pick a percent. I don't have like the stat on hand. Let's just say like maybe 75% of that is not on you now. What can
Mm-hmm.
you now do in your organization for your team with that extra time? How much better you can be. And to me, that's the promise of all of this, overall, the AI story, and ultimately automation stories, platform stories. Like, to me, that's the point.
Yeah. And I like that kind of middle ground between, like, you could get an MSSP and just let them do everything, but then, yeah, are they doing a good job? I don't know.
Yeah,
Are they catching the current threats? With this kind of middle ground, like, you're still running it, but you can also see, and you can also build on top of, what you've got there. So I think I don't want to assume everybody knows what XIAM is, and being already almost 15 minutes in, maybe tell us a little bit. We've mentioned SIM. I think we've hinted at what the product does, but maybe a bit of an elevator pitch, like some stats on what you get when you pick it up, might help give some people some context for what we're talking about here.
completely fair. Completely fair. So Cortex XIM essentially is extended security, intelligence, and automation management. All right, so it's a mouthful. Acronym works smoother. And the idea here is to try to bring together much of what we've struggled to, in the a la carte method, if you will, bring together on our own. So truly unifying not only the front end, but the back end, the UI, it's all in one place. This way, folks, especially the engineers and architects, spend a lot less time parsing, a lot less time trying to figure out how to bring the data in and get that foundation. Right? We talk about this all the time. Data is the foundation of all that is the security challenge. You need to have the telemetry, the raw data, the insights here. And then in this era, help normalizing it for AI, right? That's already hard. Now, try to enrich that additionally with threat intel, the latest that's going on. And to me, when you have that platform now, you have just that base, not even talking about the sensors and all that stuff yet. When you have that base, now it's really operationalized for you to be successful with now bringing in the telemetry from the various sensors. And to me, that's what XSIAM is all about, is that platform. Bringing together the SIEM, EDR, network detection response, a native SOAR, and start helping you not only just like eliminate the overall silos that come with, hey, now this team's responsible for that, this team's responsible for this team's responsible for this various spot here. I now have to reach out to them to find out if this feed or this signal is true. When it's time to remediate, I also have to go into the various consoles to make sure it's right. To me, this is where you start really changing that. And then ultimately bringing in automation to help you bring in data, to help you identify threats faster, to help you close out threats faster. Then when we get to the actual incidents, because now you're no longer focused on just connecting disparate, alerts to events, have XSIAM help you truly collate these incidents, connecting this noise that was previous hard to understand if it's connected, and now have you focus on solving it. And whether you have the machine do it for you, or you have it take it only a certain step, take it this far and then hit up Adrian, it's up to you. You can also have the opportunity then now to have the system suggest, what should we do next? Maybe it says, hey, look, you've solved these before. Why don't we automate how you resolve that? So now what was previously a manual intervention is now an automated one. And to me, this is where we start talking about really changing that time imbalance, because it's so hard to find those needles in the haystack. Let's focus more
Yeah.
on the needles, right? Classic cliche. And this is where it starts to come together.
Yeah, and I feel like that automation piece is really important, because a lot of those startups I was talking about earlier that are kind of launching into the, automate the SOC kind of space with this messaging, where they're saying they're doing everything with AI. Like I've also talked to one that says, look, we just focus on automation. We don't touch AI at all. So I think it's important to point out there, like a lot of the messaging I'm seeing, or automate with AI, but like maybe there's some specific tasks AI can do in there. But a lot of this automation, like I mentioned before, like you don't need AI to pull the reverse DNS of something. You don't need AI to do a lot of these. Just open an extra tab and look something up, right? A lot of these are just queries. A lot of them are lookups. A lot of them are, um, just decision support. Stuff that gets you to that point where, is this really an incident? Is it not an incident? And yeah, maybe summarization comes in handy there, and generative AI can help out. But yeah, that automation piece, I like that is part of the acronym there. It was something that always seemed to be kind of like an add-on to a lot of SIMs in the past, where it wouldn't really get used,
Sure.
and then we saw SOAR break out as a separate piece.
Yeah.
But again, just a huge amount of development work you had to do to get some of these SOAR playbooks up and running. And I like that we're seeing a lot more emphasis on the automation piece here. So I just kind of want to emphasize that AI AI can be used for some automation steps, but AI itself is not synonymous with automation at all.
And I think together, that's where the power starts to really show itself. The way you can automate how alerts are triggered and then stitched from the various data sources to act like, excuse me, not act like, but to show that this threat actor behaviors are, in fact, unified as one threat actor, whereas before it was sorting through on your own. Creating that incident with the collation of alerts, Then helping you understand the impact, assessment, containment. Where is it at? XIM, for example, does this by showing at the incident level where all those alerts are on the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Again, just
Mhm.
another option for how you can see this presented for you. You didn't have to do it yourself. And then at the next level, showing you all the different playbooks you can have, right? So if we just think of the threat detection and incident response workflows, bringing AI here to help you understand not only the severity of the risk, the type of a risk, the types of tactics used and to expose them, the types of, let's say, if it's across hosts and users, and for what we talk about a lot, behavior indicators of compromise, like the analytics engines that are firing and why. All of that is helpful, but on its own, it's really hard, right? This is what we've been struggling with for 15 years, more. So bringing it all together to me is where it really starts to become the big transformation.
Yeah, and just to highlight, I think we're getting to a point where automation isn't a nice to have, like, or just like minimizing the amount of SOC analysts we have to hire or something like that. It's not just, uh, you know, spending on labor, and getting some of this rote routine work that humans hate to do, and getting that automated. Attackers are using automation. And if attacks happen faster, we have to move faster as well. I think we're getting to a point where this is, not a nice to have. This is kind of a must have, where like the likelihood of you patching a 0-day vulnerability quicker than they can start launching exploits at it. We have data on that, and we're not fast enough. We cannot patch fast enough to keep up with that flow at this point, which means we have to be really good at detecting it and responding to it. If we're not able to get those patches in place fast enough, it doesn't mean that we do one or the other. Like, we're still going to patch it as quickly as we can, but at the same time, the SecOps team needs to be spotting any successful exploitations and knocking those down as quickly as they happen. Um, so yeah,
Yeah,
to
on
me
that
that's
topic, I
like,
think a lot of the
yeah,
challenge. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. I was
I
just going to
think of the
repeat
challenge a
myself.
lot of you've got prevention, detection, and response. Like, shocker. Like, let's just pick three for a minute.
Yeah.
When the prevention layer is wildly overwhelmed, either by an attack or, um, let's just say, under resourced, then a lot of the responsibility naturally falls onto the detection layer. And if that layer breaks, because again, it's overburdened, there's too many signals coming through for the team to sort through, you don't have enough folks, you're struggling to truly triage anyway, and now you've got new data sources to integrate. We talked about the cloud story. Many teams were reluctant and then maybe have been forced to bring in this types of data sources. It's disparate from the SOC, maybe it's even harder to understand which team is responsible for those problems. And then now your response layer has to do all of it, right? Because the prevention and the detection layers were overwhelmed. To me, that's the point of bringing in AI and automation together to help not only stop problems sooner, identify problems sooner, remediate problems sooner, so that when the team's not so overwhelmed as the people, right, then you can actually do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really important because the area of products we're talking about have historically had the highest overhead, I think, of probably any security products, in terms of just managing the tool itself. And we've come a long way
Mm-hmm.
there in terms of manageability with it. Certainly not having to use an on-prem is a big plus. Like, if that's not for some people, maybe it's still requirements, but just managing storage on a SIEM, I have nightmares about. I have PTSD about just trying to keep the SIEM up and running while I'm pumping 100 million events into it per day. And yet, like, if there was something that was unsupported, and it was up to us to write our own parser, I've been kind of de-emphasizing the importance of AI a little bit so far, but here's one place where I've just seen it do amazing things. Where you tell it, I need a parser for X, and because it's consumed the documentation for how to write a parser or how to write, YAML, or whatever format you're writing your detection rules in, even specific proprietary ones, it just spits it right out. And that's, to me, that's a game changer, because that's stuff where, like, I had even gone to training a few times on how to write parsers for a particular SIM platform. Just never had time to do it, though. There was never time in the day. I was never freed up for, I would have needed 3, 4, 5 days to actually write that parser. And now you can ask AI to do it. You can say, here's some log samples, write me a parser for this platform. And like the
Yeah.
examples I've seen, it just spits it right out. And, if not the first try, it works. Like maybe a few tweaks you have to make to it. But I've been amazed with its ability to do that. Generative AI
And I think
specifically.
that's the important takeaway for some of our audience members is like there's a journey that you're going to be on, whether it's with this org, whether it's your career. There's going to be a journey here of how you get to this, let's just say, utopian state where AI can help you do a lot more. As we talked about a few times, how AI and automation come together and can help you fundamentally not just do a lot more, but be more effective. The parsing example, with Cortex XIM, you don't have to actually write these parsers. You don't have to ask AI to actually do it for you. There's an easy onboarding flow to how to do it, and the parsing portion is happening on the back end. And now whether we have to use a VM broker or connect via syslog or API, those
Right.
portions aren't completely on you to make sure it works and is troubleshooting constantly to make sure it stays up. You let the system manage that and then alert you when there's problems.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe you can't get there today. So the stopgap can be, to your point, you find solutions to help you integrate that code. But sometimes it's really hard because some organizations maybe block the access to some of these tools. I'm not saying that's
Yeah.
wrong, by the way. Some of these can be very risky. Um,
Yeah.
Maybe use like an enterprise browser at your firm, and man, it's really restrictive. You can't put anything
Yeah.
in there. Um, and
And
then
maybe you
that's
don't
why I
want to
think about
upload
these.
production log samples to DeepSeek, to the SaaS tool.
Hey, that's become a pretty popular brand name this week, so
Yeah.
maybe folks aren't aware. But yeah, like to me, the point becomes back to my earlier topic of the promises it's supposed to help you, and you're already overworked. So you want these things to be accessible, but they need to be accessible in the right way. And that's why I think it's helpful many of these vendors, just particularly Palo Alto Networks, bringing these solutions into the platform itself, not forcing you now to my joke before, a la carte method, and make sure it all works properly. I'm sure the InfoSec team is happier too, by the way, as a whole.
And I think there's going to be this kind of learning curve where, like, AI is pretty easy to use, but generative AI can do such a broad range of tasks that you might not be aware. It might not even occur to you that this is not something you need to do manually. Like
Mhm.
I imagine there's people in workplaces, attendees of this call, who walk by people, and kind of stop and say, you don't have to do that manual anymore, right? Like that's not something, like data cleanup in a text file. Like I need this text file formatted differently so I can import it into this other tool. It does a great job of that kind of thing. You can just drop it, a blob of messy text you scraped off a website somewhere, or maybe the FBI, still sends you IOCs in an email in a terrible format or something like that, or you get it from Infogard in a format that's not ideal. You can just copy, paste, say, put this in CSV format, and just it does it. It's
Yeah,
pretty amazing
yeah.
at those kinds of things. But I think there's a learning curve there. Like people, and I think this has happened through history where technology kind of takes these leaps, and maybe you're not aware of it, you don't see it, you don't realize. Uh, particularly for people who maybe don't get to go to training a whole lot. So they attend some of
Oh,
these
yeah,
free
yeah.
webinars instead. That what is possible has completely changed over the last 3 years. Since
Fair.
ChatGPT was released, and I think you have to go into experimentation mode and take some time to say, okay, like map out my process. Here's what my day looks like. Here's the things that really suck that I hate to do. Do I still need to do those anymore? Or, can XSIAM automate that for me? Or, can I use a third party, LLM to do that for me? I think we need to take time out of our days every now and then and disrupt ourselves, right? And say,
Yeah.
do I still need to
I think that's a
spend
super good
hours
point.
every week on this?
Super good point. Implementing things can be incredibly hard when you're trying to implement them on something that is currently running. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's the super like old cliche of like trying to change the tires on a car that's moving, or repairing a ship hull while it's out to sea. Like, there's a bunch of these old cliches.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me also of like proactive assessments. Unit 42, for example, here at Palo Alto Networks, help you try to solve for some of these things. You do, let's say, cloud assessments, try to understand, what do you have out there, help you see, do you have assets exposed? Do you have assets you didn't know? It's hard to implement that when you're overworked, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got to carve out that time. And I think it's similar here with how would I implement AI? Now, great, it's a topic that folks are talking about, it's an acronym many are probably sick of even hearing. But what's the fundamental tenet? Like, you're actually trying to solve for some kind of problem. That's what you're actually doing. So I think you and the team can distill down to, let's say, three of the major challenges you have. And if we tease it out for a second, maybe it's workflow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how does the data come in? Who are we reaching out to ensure the data health? Who is then responsible for updating the team that the data health is either been repaired or is continually flowing properly? Then, how is that data feeding into, let's say, an incident? Right? We got these raw telemetry logs, and now they're sitting here in just base, I don't know, JSON code or something like that. Like, okay, now how do I do something with that? It's not helpful for me. Okay, so now we think, are there ways to enrich this information? Are there ways to identify, to your point earlier, the mapping of the IOCs that we got from that CSV file? Uh, Now it's like, okay, the technology available today could be, to your point, an LLM, could be already embedded in an existing SIEM. It could be part of a larger play where we think of going beyond the SIEM and those capabilities being embedded plus others. And to me, that's the point. You start to explore that. Otherwise, if you get into the model of I want LLMs to solve everything, it's the old cliche of, well, when you think everything's a nail, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, um, it's not as
So,
helpful, I think.
yeah, and something I'd urge people to do. I've been in some organizations who will do a hackathon like twice a year,
Mm-hmm.
and hackathons tend to be associated more with dev teams and engineering
Yeah.
teams. But I absolutely like. We're doing engineering. We're doing dev in security. I
Yeah.
guarantee you. And a lot of people say, well, we can't afford the time to take 3 to 5 days or a whole week off to go build a bunch of stuff, and then and usually the format is go off for 3 days, build something, on day four, present what you built, and usually people already have stuff on their list. Like, in a perfect world, if I had a day where nothing else was bothering me, I would try to rebuild this or build a solution for
Mm-hmm.
this so I don't have to do it anymore. And I'd argue you can't afford not to do that every now and then, because you're probably not as efficient as you could be. You're probably wasting time. There are probably really cool, nice features in your products that you're not utilizing because either you didn't realize that they were there, or you didn't take the 5 or 10 minutes. You think you're going to have to set aside a whole day to do it, and you end up getting it done in an hour or something like that. And you procrastinate on it because you think it's going to take a lot longer. So I'd argue you can't afford not to do those things every now and then. Make sure you're getting all the value you can out of, the products you're already paying for. Encourage your employees to get creative and build some cool stuff. And every single time I've seen a company do it, like you see this kind of almost step function where they take this big leap and they grow as a company, they grow as a team, and things just feel easier when you take a week off and remember, oh, I can write some Python, right? Like, I can do, like this muscle, in my brain still works.
I couldn't agree with you more. I can imagine of the 145 folks listening in live right now, like, well, yeah, it's easy for you two to say, like, you're not you're not sitting in the sock right now,
Yeah, you're not seeing what I'm seeing. Yeah.
struggling, yeah, struggling to even make time to listen to this webinar. Like, so
Well,
we hear you.
I'd argue if
I,
if
I
you're
get
on this webinar, you got some time. You've proven that by
it.
joining.
I'm really hoping there's not a bunch of people using me as the excuse for not working, or maybe I actually hope for that. Maybe I could liberate you for a minute. But the point I was going to make is practice. It's practice. It's really hard to get better at your craft when you only ever do, game time. Um, sports is a classic analogy in this realm of thinking. It's similar, I think, in cybersecurity. If it's only ever the live fire exercise, it's
Mhm.
hard to practice. And if you can't carve out at least some time for some portion of the team, and similar with what I mentioned before about like proactive services, like trying purple team exercises or something, tabletop. It's really hard
Mhm.
to get better, to know your current standing, to improve from these things. And so I get it, it's hard, but encourage folks to try to figure out ways to do it. Be creative where you can be. I've heard examples of folks that now that they have XIM, like look that they're not as hyper focused every day on having to do triage alone, or like we talked
Mhm.
about, ensuring parsing of new data sources, significant less time. We've got some examples of customers, it's like 75% fewer of their incidents actually require manual investigation. So
Mhm.
solutions that start to get in place to help you save time so you can get to those projects. And we know your list of projects hasn't gotten smaller, but if you're so focused on just the ops part of the work, you don't have time for that. And then you don't have time for enrichment. And our SOC, for example, at Palo Alto Networks uses XIM. We've had very, very few folks over the years since we've implemented it leave the team. They're doing far more threat hunting, far more proactive projects. Uh, so these are the opportunities that can be gained when you think differently about just the technology stack you have, so that you can focus more on the people to enrich their process and enrich their careers.
Just chatting with the audience here. So yeah, as I just typed into the chat, feel free to ask questions anytime. And yeah, I use the sports team analogy often, particularly with IR teams, but SecOps also. Um, where like how could you even hope to perform well if you've never practiced together, right? If you haven't been hit with a real attack or a real breach or a real ransomware incident, if you're not simulating that to make sure you're looking at the right things, or maybe your detection engineering is really good, but there's still this gap between like, is a human going to see it and act on it if you don't have some kind of response fully automated? And I spent a lot of time analyzing breaches and what happens there. And it's not the tools that fail; it's the people and process stuff. That glue you need between the tools and the people using them. Uh, to your point, Greg, without that practicing, you're not going to have that glue there. Or you're not going to
And isn't
know.
that the most frustrating? Isn't that the most frustrating part too? Is because some of these most famous breaches, and then they
Yeah,
get named by
you
the
had the
org that got
funding,
breached,
you
right?
had the tools, you had the people. Like all you had to do was stitch all that. Not to say that it's easy to stitch all that together, but in
Oh
a lot
no,
of
no,
these
no,
cases,
no.
it didn't even occur to them that they needed to practice.
And I think that's the fundamental tenet of why thinking about how to transform the SOC came about at Palo Alto Networks, right? Look, why is it after the fact? We can do the forensic work. The noises are there, the alerts were there, signals, but it was there. So we have the items in place to help us, but they're not optimized to help us. So how do we rethink that? And at the risk of sounding like one of those AI startups you were joking about before, it was like, you can't just go out and make the same mousetrap then. Because if you make the same mousetrap, well, then we're about to just repeat the same insanity. So it had to be about finding the optimizations you could in each step of the process. And to me, that's where unifying data, AI, and automation. Yeah, sure, those are the pillars of XIM. But for folks here in the audience, like all these famous breaches then get named by the organization that was trounced, which again is a travesty of the whole point. And then the teams are then blamed, like, man, you didn't do X. How come you failed? It was there. As if to your
Yeah.
point, like it was the super clear indicator and you just like
Right.
glance past it. No, it's really, really hard. But if you can't find out, for example, if you are getting the right information from that data source, the right telemetry, the raw data, for example, coming from the endpoint to help you identify anomalous behavior, or if we stick to people again, did this deviate from their normal working behavior, accessing systems they typically have in the past? Privileged escalation. Again, these correlations aren't like wildly complex, but
Right.
when there's hundreds of thousands of noises occurring at the same time, they are.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to find out if your team who thinks the shields are up for that, if it's working, right? If you can't prioritize that time. And so that's, again, I think why we encourage, especially when I'm in the EBCs and I talk about it, whether it's my firm or another firm, encourage that proactive approach to try to think about, like, are we as good as we are? And just as a quick aside, I talked to a customer relatively recently, and I'll try to anonymize as much as I can. They went through these tabletop exercises, and it turned out there was a mistake with how they communicated through ServiceNow to their HR team.
Oh.
And HR coming back to communicate to InfoSec, and it was as foolish as deprovisioning laptops and deprovisioning credentials, decommissioning credentials. Again, really small thing. And hey, if that was in a report,
Really
everybody would
important
be like,
thing though.
that's so obvious. That's so obvious. I can't believe you did that. But it wasn't even the InfoSec team. It wasn't even SOC. This was a stakeholder group within the org. It would be awful to find out it was that as the weak link, while this breach is named after, your company and your team's the one to blame, and no one thinks it's, this random stakeholder team in the org chart. Again,
Yeah.
not the most complex example I've ever illustrated before, but it's to help highlight, like, this is why it's worth it.
So there's kind of a mental framework that I've come up with that I'm going to share, and then we've got a whole bunch of questions rolling in that we'll jump over to. So we'll get your questions answered here. But when I'm looking, you're talking about the haystack, the needles, all that. When I think about that stuff, I tend to separate things into red flags and yellow flags, right? Like there's a yellow flag is something that could be bad, but only if we see it at 3 a.m., or only if we see it from the lobby PC, creating a new domain admin account or something. Maybe that's a poor example, creation of a new general user account or something like that. That should probably only happen on certain PCs. But red flags, we never ever want to miss a red flag because we're looking at yellow flags, right? Um, so like that's prioritizing seeing those red flags over the yellow flags. The dumping of creds, the new domain admin account, the pivoting through the organization, turning off antivirus. Like that used to be my MO as a pen tester, is I would just net stop Symantec and do my stuff and then net start.
You're not wrong.
McAfee
You're not wrong.
or whatever again. And I knew that it logged something on the system, but I also knew that nobody ever saw those logs because nobody was, in my experience, was ever looking. So I think as a principle, kind of thinking of things as red flags and yellow flags, and making sure 100% of the time you're going to see those red flags before you start moving to the more complex, like, this could be a bad thing, but only if connected with these two other yellow flags, and then it makes a red flag. And I think we get kind of bogged down in trying to see everything, and in trying to see everything, we end up seeing nothing. So that's kind of my framework for thinking about alert triage there.
I
And
think I heard an
yeah,
example the other day, and this is a rather US centric version, but which which correlations do you think are so valuable they would fire off an alert and it would make you leave watching the Super Bowl? Like
mhm.
you'd stop right now. My man Chris Tillett, give him credit. He's the one. I'm sure I butchered his quote, but it's something along those lines. Like, which is the one that makes you literally leave the family gathering or leave the
Yeah,
event you've been looking for, or time with your friends, wakes you up in the middle of the night? True VIP. Those are the ones that, like, especially when we think about bringing correlations over in a migration. Those are the ones you want to keep, not the ones that you've just been keeping for many, many years because you wrote it so long ago. And similar with the alert side. And I see a question in here from Brian Richardson about like best security SOC
mhm.
uh, items that AI could bring the most return for. And to me, that's what I think of the most, is having it built into the detection engine, right? That is critical. How we stitch together, uh, data stitching is how we frame it in XSIAM, to bring together to then report on anomalous behavior. And so to me, I think a lot about like insider threat detection and response. Having that actually identify, like, look, Adrian is not acting like Adrian. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean he's
Yeah, it doesn't
nefarious,
match the
but it
baseline.
brings, yeah, yeah. So we can see in XIM, for example, there'll be a table that'll highlight, like, look, these are his typical working hours. Um, this is where, based on his peers, how he's also trending, right?
I can't tell you how many years I've been begging for something like that.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I don't
Like,
blame you.
just give me a
But this is
profile. Give me
how,
a profile of what's normal for a user.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
then all of a sudden I'm doing all this historical research. Because I'm looking at a
Yes.
thing, I've got a name, and I'm like, okay, is this person hacked, or is this? Because one of the principles when I used to train incident responders is, if the first time you're looking at your logs is during an incident, everything's going to look bad, right? There's all kinds of
Yeah.
weird stuff going on in your environment. So you need to get used to looking at them so that you have some kind of mental, or functional baseline for what's weird and what isn't. And having that built into it, like I've literally been asking vendors to build that for years,
Yeah, yeah. And
decades,
well,
actually now.
well, I love that you're making it sound like what we built is just so amazing. So hey, thanks for that. But the other part is what's
Well, it just
behind
makes
it,
sense,
right?
right?
Yeah, sure. Sure, no, agreed. What's behind it then is like behavior indicator of compromises, right? And so where we can actually understand these are not just analytics that are built on like a single layer of problems, if then statements, if you will, but get far more nuanced. To me, this is what you should be demanding of the software you're using, right?
Yeah.
Because if you have to build all this on your own and integrate it on your own, it's incredibly difficult to do. And Brian, for example, who asked this question, like, is your team poised to do that? To not only implement this model and integrate it into the solutions you're using today as part of the normal work stream, but also are you able to maintain that model? And that's a lot of work. And that's why I like to highlight the difference between what we demand out of things like generative AI versus what we mean when we talk about actual ML models to help identify things, detectors to help identify things, and keep those up to date.
Yeah. Yeah. And, for me, Brian, I think Greg, you covered a lot there. But also, there's a lot of stuff like observability. Like it's easy to lose track of visibility. Like, we don't have mainframe logs in here. We don't have like a story I heard recently about an APT attack was AIX. They didn't have any visibility into the AIX systems, probably because of a log parser. I don't know the exact reason, but using AI to kind of tackle some of those problems that haven't been tackled because it's waiting on human labor, right? Or some skill set you don't have. Now you have something, that can help with that. And you can take that off your to-do list and get visibility into that blind spot that you've maybe had for weeks, months, or years. So yeah, I wouldn't just think about AI in terms of stuff that's automated behind the scenes or you're using every day, but also these kinds of one-time, like we don't have a Python developer, so this has never been checked off our list. Well, you do now. You do have a Python developer, for whatever price a month you pay for Copilot or any of these tools that are out there. Um,
Yeah, agreed, agreed.
let's see. So we have another question here from Samuel. The tenet that technology should help humans do more and not replace them. How do we ensure this principle is upheld in the deployment of AI and ML solutions? Yeah, I mean, being so I'll let you answer here, Greg. But for me, I think being very involved in the process of onboarding that kind of stuff. So a lot of organizations I know have put together like a AI. I might blank on the term they use, like a not a board, but committee, right? Like an AI committee that
Center
kind of
of
talks about.
excellence or something.
Uh, okay, that term makes me twitch a little bit, but sure, Center of Excellence Committee, whatever you want to call it, a group of people that within the company that are deciding on, okay, we're going to incorporate AI, but intentionally. Like here's our principles here. Here's the things we don't want it to do. Here's the things we do want it to do, and just the whole company being on the same page about how you're going to use it, how you're going to integrate it. Because to a large extent, like some of that's going to be out of your hands. Like every tool now has AI features built into it, right? Like just you can't even just block this stuff anymore because it's just it's built into a bunch of stuff that's already critical to you. You didn't ask for it; it just
Mhm.
showed up one day, right? So yeah, that's the best answer I have to that one.
I think it comes back to the idea of what is the tenet that you're trying to solve for, right? And then think of practice in anything, whether it's cooking. Um, let's take it, okay, we'll stick with cooking. You're over here like dicing your vegetables or something, and you want to make sure they're all the same size. Well, the point isn't because you wanted to only show that you're great knife skills. It was because the finished product, you want to have uniform texture, uniform flavor distribution. And I'm clearly making this stuff up. I watched a few cooking shows, so obviously I'm an expert. But that's the same idea here. Like, what did you need? And sometimes folks are thinking of AI to solve a problem because it's actually the symptom, right?
Mhm.
What you're overwhelmed with is a symptom of how you've architected the SOC, let's say. It's
Yeah,
too much engineering work to keep the detections alive. Well, it's because you're
yeah, that's a
not
good way of
able to
putting it.
implement, right? And so I think of it as start there, right? What are the strategies we're trying to solve for? And don't be so high level where you're like, I just want to be better at detecting. Like, okay.
Yeah.
So today's event is how we actually get deeper on
So it's a great point. I think one of the common pitfalls we see in security is there are lots of tools that are great at generating work for you to do. They will give you stuff to do.
that.
Like a lot of these tools are great at giving you stuff to do, but you have to define what value means for you coming out of those tools, and you have to decide if any of that work is valuable to you. You have to say to yourself. So again, like the Super Bowl thing, if I just shut off the system and sent all the people who worked on it home, would there be an adverse impact? Right? Like, would anybody notice? right? Because if something's producing business value to your organization, it should be visible. Like the lack of that value should be felt. And if that's not the case, then you've got work to do.
Yeah, no, agree, agree. It's not a trivial thing. And I don't mean to sit up here and be like, oh man, it's so easy. Carve out the time to figure out what your strategy is. It's hard. I'm not saying it isn't. But these investments are valuable. And especially to this point where it's like, how do we make sure we're not ultimately procuring software to eliminate our jobs later? If I read between the lines on that question, I could be inferring, by the way, it might not be what you meant. That
Yeah.
that type of strategy mapping is what's going to help you ensure you're going the right way.
Yeah. And again, like, where does that come from? Where do your goals come from? And generally, I think they should be informed by bad things that are happening to other companies. Look at other companies, other outcomes that you don't want to have, ransomware, different breach, data loss scenarios. And I think that should be driving a lot of this, right?
No, agree, agree. And how you stay up to date on that stuff is already another challenge too, right? Whether
Yeah.
you found maybe you're at the risk of sounding like I'm older, maybe you just have an RSS feed that's still getting things for
Yeah.
you. Maybe you found some
I, I,
other
I do
website
have,
that
I do have RSS feeds. I absolutely do.
yeah,
Yeah.
or maybe you're like a Reddit person and you're over here trying to figure out like in this subreddit, are they collating the right info for you? Carving out the time to go do that. Like, oh, this is really, really hard to do. And so to me,
Mhm.
that's the other part of trying to make sure you have the right threat intel integrations. Is it giving you the intel at the alert level? Is it also enriching the incident level? If it's only something that when you're doing an actual threat hunting tactic, where you're combing through raw logs and then trying to map independently in another system back to a threat intel list of IOCs, like, man, that's a lot of work. That's really hard to do too, right? And
Yeah.
so I think that's the point of like, how can you start figuring out, okay, that's actually a symptom of a problem. Maybe AI is not the right reason to solve for that. The,
Yeah.
the disease is different.
Yeah, and I think important to separate. So we get a lot of stuff from vulnerability intelligence and vulnerability management. That's never going to be a risk to the business, right? So that's another one of those kind of busy work generators there, where like if we go back look at 2024, I guarantee you can probably come up with a list of 200 or less vulnerabilities you really needed to prioritize and worry about. Where you would have been in hot water if you ignored them. Out of the 20,000 plus that came out that year. And I think a lot of this stuff just comes down to how good are you at ignoring the stuff that's safe to ignore and focusing on the stuff that shouldn't be ignored. So it again, if you're constantly shifting your stuff and re-architecting your detections and stuff like that, like on a daily basis, you're probably chasing stuff you don't need to chase because the attackers don't change up their techniques that often. So that's my thoughts there. Let's see if we can get to one more
I think it
question
comes
before we
back.
get to
Oh, I'm sorry. Go
wrap.
ahead.
Yeah. So Patty, I'm not sure if I can answer this for you. I think that's something more you're going to get out of a vulnerability management solution, like a DAST or a SAST. Um, but I have seen some very creative solutions. I assume you're talking about like OpenAI scraping your web pages a million times a day, that kind of thing. I've seen some people are actually messing with them, grabbing training data and producing like junk data for them to, you know, to poison their training. I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but that's a bit left of field of what we're talking about today. So I'm not well prepared to answer that one. Um, and the last question we have here. Many SOC platforms use different SIEMs and depend on pre-configured use cases to deal with detection and response. Is AI helping in the okay? Is AI helping to include other use cases? I think is what's being asked here versus just like the pre-configured ones. I don't know, Greg, if you have a you have an answer for that. But and generally, it's a pretty
So
short list of use cases here, right?
if you don't mind, whoever asked, maybe shoot in a couple example use cases. And the reason I bring this up, and I'm sure many of you in the audience have heard this before, the spectrum of use case usage, like the phrase use case, is almost as bad as AI. Like somebody will be like, oh, well, I bought this because the use case is threat detection. Okay, again, pretty high level use case. And then this one is actually what I'm really trying to do is get very, very, very deep into I want to understand behavior of a user. Is your SIEM helping me do that? And it's like, okay, fair. It helps threat detection, but it's deeper. To me, the AI portion is adding enrichment of detection, anomalous behavior, things like that. Not necessarily just saying like, hey, look, Adrian and Gregor are a minute too long on their webinar. Like that's not helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think you still have to come in with the use cases, but maybe it can help you figure out how to implement them, right?
Yeah, and I'd argue
Yeah.
the other way is when we keep thinking of SIEMs in the classic example of I needed a log warehouse, I needed data warehouse, and then I started asking it to do a bunch of security things. That's where a lot of us, I think, still end up in trouble. I mean, if we're
Yeah.
really honest, like SIEMs have tried to come back to the security world. They tried to make the S cool again in SIEM, but like it's more of like the IT world that really loves it.
Compliance. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're struggling trying to get the value out of it. It's time to think differently.
Yeah.
That's my shtick anyway.
Agreed. And I think that's a good point to wrap this up, Greg. This has been great. A lot of good questions from the audience. Big thanks to our sponsor, Palo Alto Networks, for making today's webcast possible. Big thanks to you, Greg, for being here with me. This was a blast.
Thanks for having me. Welcome to the Time to Chat. Thanks.
Finally, big thanks to the audience for joining us. We'll see you next time.
All right, take care.